Alright everyone, and welcome back. Last time we got our enemies fixed up, and now we have enemies that we can fight, and they can also kill us at the same time, and hurt us at the same time. And I think it's about time that we move on something a bit more complicated. I think it's about time we start working on our inventory, since this is a survival game and you're gonna have to collect loot and collect materials. You will need an inventory where to store all of that data. And I think the easiest way to do that is starting right away with the scripts. So, as I said, in terms of scripts, we're gonna go into player here, because everything that is related to our player will be here, and that goes for the inventory as well. But I want to create a subfolder called inventory, because we're gonna have a lot of scripts, not only one. So I think it's cleaner if we put it in its own sub folder. And let's start with a script. So we're gonna create a script, and in the inventory, it's gonna inherit a resource. You can leave this as a node and you can change it later on, but I just like to change it here. And the script name is going to be inventory item. And we will create. So let's double click it to open the script up, and here we go. If you didn't change source in the creation panel, you will have node here, and you can just change it to source. So it's not really an issue. And here we're gonna give the script a class name, and we're gonna name it inventory item. And you'll understand why we gave it the class name in a second. And I wanna export some variables. So this is gonna be a name. It's gonna be a string, empty string at first. And also we need a variable for our item texture. These are the variables that are going to define our item in the resource. That's why the most important thing to have is a name and a texture. And great, now we can actually go ahead and create an item. So we're going to create another subfolder in the inventory. I'm going to call it items. And in here, I'm going to right click and create new resource. And here in our resource, we can actually search for our player inventory item, and you will find it here with the class name. That's why we gave it that class name, so we can actually find it in the resource inventory item. And here depends what item you're trying to make. I already got some textures for some wood, so we're gonna make some wood here. Let's call it wood. Let's choose a name here, so we're gonna name it wood. And as I said, I got some textures for some wood here, and we're just gonna drag and drop it right here. And now we actually have our first thing ready, our first item ready. Of course, you're gonna have to do this for every single item. I'll show you an example. I'm gonna create another resource, sword. So let's call this sword. And here in the name sword, and back up here we have the sword sprite. So we're gonna just drag and drop this. And you have to do this for every single item, but it is a bit time consuming, but in the end it is what you need to do. Now, I think this is just the inventory item. I think now it's about time we go to and do the actual inventory. So we're going to go to another script. Let's call this inventory. And let's actually save it in the same location, scripts, player, inventory, and we're going to save it right here. And we're going to hit create. We can delete all of this since it's another resource actually. And we're also going to give it a class name, inventory. And we're going to do export var items. And this variable is going to be an array of inventory items. Remember the class name that we gave it? The class name is a reference to these items. So any resource has the class name reference to it. That's why we gave it a class name, so we can access it in other scripts or other resource. And yeah, so let's go ahead and actually create our inventory resource. So we're gonna do resource again. I'm just gonna write inventory, and here we have inventory. We can save this as player inventory. Good, and we can open this up. And here you can choose the size of the inventory that you want to be in your game. In our case, I think I only want our inventory to be 9 slots big. So I'm just gonna do 9. And here in these slots, you can actually drag the items. So this is basically the back end for your inventory. Of course, we don't have any visualization for it yet, but we will do that later on. Now, how do we actually link this inventory to our player? And that's fairly simple. All we need to do is open up our player scene. So we're gonna, let's look for our player scene. So we have scenes, player. And in our player scene, we're just gonna come here to our script. We need to find, we're gonna export var inventory. And inventory, it's gonna be a inventory class name, so you have to write inventory. And now if we click on our player, we have this empty space where we can drag and drop our player inventory resource. And here we still have all the items that we chose earlier, and it is now saved on our player. Great. Now, the thing is, the only issue that we have is we need to re-import the player, so we're going to have to delete this from the world real quick. And we're going to have to re-import it. Hopefully this doesn't create any bugs. Let's actually test it real quick. No, we're fine. We're fine. The game is working well. And yeah, so we have the inventory actually linked to the player now. But we still need a visual representation for what we're doing. And that is fairly easy as well. We're just gonna make a new scene, and it's gonna be a user interface. And we're gonna call this inventory UI. And just for representation, we're gonna use a color rect for now. Let's make it full rect. We will change this later on, you don't have to worry. And let's save it in our scenes folder, since it's a scene. Great. Now we're gonna give it a script, and the script is going to be with the inventory folder, obviously. So let's open up the script, and yeah, so the first thing to do is we're gonna make a Boolean variable that will check if we have our inventory opened or not. So we're gonna do var is opened equals false, because by default the inventory is closed. And we're gonna do func ready. So in our func ready function, I wanted to close the inventory in case we made a bug in development and we left it open. I wanted to automatically close it either ways. Of course, close is a custom function that we will be creating right now. So we're gonna do func close. And here, all we need to do is we're gonna do self.hide. And we're gonna do is opened equals to false. We're gonna do the same exact thing again, but for open this time. So open, we're gonna do self.show. We're gonna do is opened equals to true. Great. Now I want to create a func process function to check our input if we want to open the inventory or not. And to do that, we're gonna do func process delta. We're gonna do if input dot is action just pressed. Let's call this E for inventory. We're gonna check if is opened. If it is opened, I want it to close. Else, if it's not opened, I want it to open. And of course, this won't work now because we don't have this called E. That's actually called env for more context. Let's go to our project. We need to go to the input map right here. We need to go to the input map right here and do env. I think that's what we called it. Yeah, env. We're gonna add this and we're gonna choose an input action for it. And I want to use tab for this specific action. And that's great. Now, practically, it should already work. So we're going to go to our player scene, and we're going to link that small UI with our player. So we're going to click on this chain, and we have env UI, inventory UI. We can just do open, and it will automatically import it. It imported it onto weapon. Okay, make sure you're selecting the player. Make sure you're selecting the player. But this is not working. Hold on for a second. Let's actually create a canvas layer first, and let's now import it under the canvas layer. Great. See, it all looks nice. Now, if we go into our world now, by default, the inventory is closed, but if we press tab, the whole screen is white. If I press tab again, it's gone. And that's how we make sure that our inventory opens and closes. Of course, this is just the basics. We're still gonna come back to this, and we're gonna change this color rect, obviously, with something a lot better, because this currently isn't ideal for an inventory. But for now, I think this is all we need. And later on, we're gonna finish up with better visual representations of our inventory, and we will then move on into other stuff. So hello and welcome back, guys. Last time we learned how to create item resources, and we actually did create 2 item resources. We did resources for wood and sword, and we also learned how to hide and show our inventory based on our input. In this case, it's tab. When we click, it shows up. When we click again, it turns off. And that's basically what we want in this series. Now, in this video, we're gonna go over visuals more. We're gonna actually make our inventory look nice, and we're gonna, if you remember last time, because we have all of our items listed here in a resource. Now, today, we're gonna make these items appear on an actual inventory grid. So let's not take too long and just jump right into it. And the first thing to do is actually delete this color rect. We don't really need it anymore. And instead of this, we're gonna create something called a 9-patch rect. This is a 9-patch rect. And in here, I did import something for UI. You'll have this, of course, linked with the video. So we're just gonna take this inventory rect, we're gonna drag it right here, and we can size it as much as we want. But it honestly doesn't really look that appealing. It doesn't even look like an inventory. And that's why I like the patch margin. And this, the patch margin is gonna make sure that we have the same exact amount of space in each corner. For an example, if I put 5 here, everything this corner, or like the left side, is only 5 pixels. If we do the same thing for right, same thing for up, and same thing for down, this looks a lot better compared to what it did like seconds ago. But for this texture in particular, I'd like to keep these values as 10. So we're gonna do this. Now it looks like a panel, and it looks really great. Now, basically, with this, it already looks nice. If we go in and test it out, it appears only at the corner. This is basically your preference where you want the inventory to appear. You can change this by sizing this up or down, and depending where you put it in this canvas. So if I put it like this, and if I run the game, it will appear in this zone. But in my case, I just like to leave it in the corner with some space, so it's not really touching the corners, like so. And I think that this way it looks really cute and fits the game. Great. So now that we're done with this part, we're gonna jump into something else, and we're gonna create a new scene. Since this is only the inventory background and not the actual inventory slots, we're gonna have to create a scene for each inventory slot. So we're gonna jump in. We're gonna do a panel, actually. So we're gonna use a panel here, and we're gonna rename this to inventory slot UI. And You don't have to size this or even touch this. For a sec, I'll explain why. We're gonna add a sprite 2D right here. And in our sprite 2D, we're gonna import this called inventory slot right here. Since the inventory slot, the texture for the inventory slot that I'm providing actually has an animation when you have an item and when it's empty. So when you import it, it's gonna be like so. So to fix this, we're just gonna go into animation and change VFrame to 1. And I like the other frame better, so we're gonna change frames to 1. Perfect. Now, the reason why we actually have a panel is because we're gonna import this later on here to control nodes. But we can't really utilize the functions of control nodes on sprite 2Ds, since they are under node 2D, since they are under the category of node 2D. So what we can do is we can create the illusion that we are using a control node, but we have a sprite linked to it. So let's actually change this to slot background. And as you can see, it's here in the center, and I want it to have the same position as our panel. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to offset, which is gonna remove centered, and here it is like so. Now, what we need to do is we need to size this panel to fit exactly with our sprite, like so. And of course, we can remove this annoying shadow by going to visibility, self-modulate. Be careful, don't change modulate, because modulate will affect the actual sprite, so it will turn it invisible as well. So just change the self-modulate to invisible, and as you can see, the shadow disappeared. Great. Now, we're gonna go into layout, and we need to change the custom minimum size to be the same exact as the current size. So later, when we import these slots into our inventory, they don't squash down. And like so, it looks perfect. We can save this, and of course in our scenes, since it's a scene, and we can go back to our inventory now. Okay, so now, how are we gonna organize all of these? Obviously, doing it hand by hand is torturous, and it won't even look right at a certain point. So Godot has provided us with a great node called a grid container. And we're gonna do full rect. And with this grid container, it will automatically line up every slot for us. So we're gonna import the slot. So we have inventory slot UI. And here we go, we have a slot right there. To duplicate the slot, just select it and hold Control and press D. We need 9 of these, so 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's change this to UI1 so it fits and they all look the same. Now, as you can see, it's only lining up vertically, but I wanted to do an actual grid. So we're gonna select the grid container. We're gonna change columns from 1 to 3. Now, this looks pretty cool. And the issue that we have here is that it's touching the corners, and that's not something that I want. So we're gonna put it in center right here. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna make this smaller. So like so. And this looks like a nice inventory. Awesome. Now, if we test this, it's obviously gonna be really small. So what we can do is, like we always do, we're just gonna go to layout, transform, we're gonna change the scale to 2. Or actually, let's do 3. So if our scale is 3, as you can see, the inventory is big, and it looks relatively nice compared to what we had before. Of course, we still can't see our items, and we'll just do that real quick as well. So what we have to do is we're gonna go to our inventory slot, and we're gonna add a center container. And let's do full rect, so it centers inside the slot. In here, we're gonna do a panel. We're gonna do the same exact trick that we did earlier for this sprite, and we're gonna do another sprite 2D. But this sprite is going to be our item display. This will hold the texture for the items that we have in our inventory. Alright, now that the node itself is ready, we can just jump in and actually create a script. And we're going to save this in our player and inventory. So let's create this and start working on the script itself. We can actually remove all of this right here. And we can start with onReady var item visual. It's a sprite 2D. And all I want is the item display. So I load this as soon as the scene gets loaded up. So even if the player rushes and clicks tab as soon as the game loads up, he won't get any bugs or break the game. So we're gonna do a function here. We're gonna create our custom function called update. We're gonna give it item from the class inventory item. And we're gonna check if the item is not empty, or if item is empty, since this is a negation. If the item is empty, I want it to hide the item visual or the item texture, because we have no item to show, so we want to hide it. Else, if we do have an item, I want the item visual to show, and I want the item visual texture equals to item.texture. If you remember correctly, we did, in our resources, we do have the texture for each item. Excuse me. And that's basically it. Now, we still have some issues, because this is logic to show the item on our slot. But how do we link this to the actual inventory? And that is by going into the inventory UI script. And in here, we're gonna create some new variables. We're gonna do, let's actually go down a bit. We're gonna do onReady var inventory, which is an inventory, by the way, from the class that we made before. We're gonna preload our player inventory resource. We want to preload it in the UI here. And we're gonna preload all of these slots. I'll explain how we're gonna do that in a second. So we're gonna do var slots array. So we're gonna put them all in an array. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna get the grid container. And we have a function that gets all of the children. So we're gonna do get children. What this does, basically, it's gonna select the grid container, and every single child that it has under the grid container is gonna be saved in this array. And that's basically what we want. Now, what we need is we will have to create a function called func update slots. And I'm gonna do for I in range. And in here, we're gonna do minimum. To choose between the minimum of inventory.items.size. If you don't remember what this is, in our player inventory resources, this array is called items. So what we're doing is we're getting the size of this array. So it's gonna get the minimum between that or the slot size, the amount of slots that we have here. So we're gonna do slots.size. All right, now we can go back. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna do slots of I. We're gonna update them with the function that we made earlier. We're gonna update them with the items that correspond to that slot. So what we're doing is we're getting this slot, we'll compare it with this place in the array, and we're updating this slot with the item that is here. If the item is empty, if we go back here, if the item is empty, we're just gonna hide the item display. And if the item is not empty, we're just gonna set up with that texture. We're gonna set it up with that texture. And I think that's everything. We just have to call the update slots in the ready function. And we can actually test this real quick. And it works perfectly. If we go back and check our player inventory, we have wood, sword. Let's actually add a sword at the end of the inventory, so it's going to be in the last slot, and you'll see it will update again. Here we go, we have a sword here as well. We can remove this. We can also remove this. And it will be gone again. So our inventory visuals are basically working fine. Now, what we need to work on next is the ability to actually pick up items from the ground, because adding them manually like this is not something your player should be doing. So we're gonna create the function that will allow us to actually pick up the items and add them to our inventory. And yeah, that's basically it.